Picture this. You are standing in a forest at night, 400,000 years ago. No streetlights, no phone screen, just black, total black, the kind of dark that swallows your hands in front of your face. The temperature has dropped 15 degrees since sunset. Somewhere close, something is moving through the undergrowth. You have no weapon that can stop it in the dark. You have no way to see it coming. Your only real defense against the night, against the cold, against the predators, against your own fear, is a small, flickering orange light that you do not yet know how to create. Here is the disruption. For over 90% of the time that fire-using hominins have existed, our ancestors could not make fire. They could only keep it. They waited for lightning to strike a tree, and then they guarded that flame like it was the most valuable object on Earth. Because it was. Losing it could mean months, sometimes years, without warmth, without cooked food, without protection. The ability to strike a spark on command, whenever you needed it, is a technology so recent that agriculture is almost as old as it. By the end of this, you will understand that fire is not just something ancient humans discovered. It is something that rewired the human brain, shrank our guts, extended our lifespans, and pushed us into every climate on the planet. And the way we finally learn to make it changes what you think you know about human ingenuity. Let's start at Wonderwork Cave, South Africa. In 2012, a team led by archaeologist Francesco Berna examined ash and burned bone fragments buried nearly 30 meters inside this cave. The dating came back to roughly 1 million years ago. This wasn't a wildfire that wandered in. Wildfires do not travel 30 meters into a cave system and then stop. Someone carried that fire inside. Someone maintained it. This is currently one of the earliest strong pieces of evidence that a hominin, likely Homo erectus, was using fire with intention deep inside a controlled space, 1 million years before Homo sapiens even existed as a species. But controlling fire and making fire are two completely different skills, separated by hundreds of thousands of years. For most of that first million years, fire use meant one thing: keep it alive. At Zhoukoudian, China, the famous Peking Man site, researchers in the 1930s and again in reanalyses through the 1990s found layers of ash they initially linked to Homo erectus campfires dated to around 400,000 to 770,000 years ago. Later re-examinations questioned how much of that ash was truly hearth fire versus natural deposits, but the broader pattern held across multiple sites globally. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans were fire keepers, not fire makers. Groups likely assigned members specifically to the task of feeding the flame, day and night, because if it went out, there might be no way to restart it for a very long time. Imagine that responsibility: one person's exhaustion, one person's mistake, and the entire group loses heat, protection, and cooked food for possibly the whole season. But here's where it gets stranger. Somewhere in that immense stretch of time, someone figured out you did not have to wait for the sky to give you fire. You could make it yourself with nothing but wood, stone, and friction. And once that happened, everything about how humans lived on this planet changed. The clearest hard evidence for deliberate fire-making, not just fire-keeping, comes from Kesem Cave in Israel. Excavated over 2 decades starting in 2000 by archaeologists Ron Barkai and Avi Gopher, this site shows repeated, patterned hearth use dating back roughly 300,000 to 420,000 years. What makes Kesem different from Wonderwork or Zhoukoudian is consistency. The hearth wasn't an occasional feature. It was a fixed central point in the cave, used again and again, generation after generation, with burned animal bones and stone tools clustered directly around it. This is what a fire-making culture looks like, not just a fire-guarding one. The site suggests these hominins weren't simply protecting a lucky flame. They had a reliable method to produce heat on demand. So what was that method? To answer this, archaeologists didn't just dig. They tried to replicate it themselves with their own hands, using nothing but materials available 300,000 years ago. The first technique is the hand drill. Take a straight, dry wooden shaft, commonly from species like elder or mullein in modern replication experiments, and spin it rapidly between your palms while pressing the tip into a wooden base. Friction generates heat. Heat generates fine wood dust. That dust, if you get hot enough, ignites into a tiny coal. Experimental archaeologists doing this today typically need 60 to 90 seconds of continuous, high-speed spinning to get an ember, and their palms blister doing it. Now imagine doing that in the freezing dark of an Ice Age night with numb fingers, when your life depends on getting it right the first time, because you might not have the strength to try a second. The second technique is more efficient, the bow drill. Instead of spinning the shaft with your palms, you wrap a cord, often sinew or plant fiber cordage, around the shaft and attach that cord to a curved piece of wood, essentially a small bow. By sawing the bow back and forth, you spin the shaft far faster and with far less fatigue than the hand drill method. Archaeologists estimate the bow drill likely emerged as an upgrade sometime in the Upper Paleolithic, though pinpointing an exact origin date is difficult, since wood and cordage almost never survive tens of thousands of years in the archaeological record. What we do have is indirect evidence, where patterns on stone and bone tools, and ethnographic parallels with fire-making techniques still used today by some indigenous communities, from the Kalahari to the Arctic. That's not the whole story, though, because friction wasn't the only method humans discovered. There was a second, completely different approach: percussion. Strike the right kind of rock against another, and you don't get friction heat. You get sparks, tiny fragments of white-hot metal shaved off by the impact. The mineral pyrite, when struck against flint or another hard stone, throws sparks capable of igniting fine, dry tinder. We know this method was in active use as recently as 5,300 years ago, thanks to one of the most famous individual humans in the archaeological record, Ötzi the Iceman. In 1991, hikers discovered Ötzi's mummified body emerging from a melting glacier in the Ötztal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy. Alongside his body, researchers found a fire-making kit, pieces of pyrite, flint, and a fungus called Fomes fomentarius, commonly known as tinder fungus or horsehoof fungus, which had been specially processed to catch a spark and smolder rather than flame up immediately. This is not a random assortment of rocks a man happened to be carrying. This is a purpose-built toolkit carried on his person over 5,000 years ago, engineered by someone who understood exactly which materials would let him produce fire reliably on demand, in the mountains, potentially in life-or-death conditions. Ötzi died from an arrow wound, likely during a violent confrontation. But the fire kit on his body tells us that even in his final days, fire-making tools were considered essential survival equipment, as fundamental as his weapons. Except there was a problem that both the friction method and the percussion method shared: they only worked if you had the right materials, the right dryness, and the right skill. And none of that was guaranteed. Wet wood does not spin into an ember. Damp tinder fungus does not catch a spark. In certain climates, coastal regions, rainforests, the depths of monsoon season, reliable fire-making by friction or percussion could be extraordinarily difficult for stretches of days or weeks. This is very likely one reason fire-keeping never fully disappeared as a practice, even after fire-making was well understood. Groups didn't abandon the guard the flame strategy the moment they learned to strike a spark. They kept both systems running in parallel for resilience, the same way you might keep both a lighter and a backup box of matches today.